Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Hammersmith Hardman Presents My Bottom. My name's Ross Little, and I'm your host, and also that bloke who runs the Hammersmith Hardman Instagram page. And I'm supremely excited and delighted to be welcoming my very, very special guest for today. He is a producer who you may recognise from producing things such as Blackadder Rides Again and It Was Alright in the 70s. He's actually a BAFTA winning producer, and I think the majority of listeners to this podcast and followers of the Hammersmith Hardman Instagram page are going to be mainly excited about the work of this particular person because he is actually the producer of the upcoming Bottom documentary, Bottom Exposed. His name is Adam McLean, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome him to the show. Adam, thank you so much for joining me on the fourth episode of the Hammersmith Hardman Presents My Bottom. It's wonderful to have you.
Ross, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for getting in touch, and it's nice to be here to chat about what I've done. It doesn't happen very often for someone with my job, so I just want to talk to everyone about everything about this documentary that we got because really like it.
Yes, I mean that is going to be this is the focus of this
Yeah.
conversation. I think will be the documentary. But before we get to that, let's just
Mm.
give listeners a bit of an idea of kind of your career to date.
Yeah.
So you're producer primarily.
Yes. Producer, series producer. I've had a couple of credits as an executive producer.
And some of the things, I just having a look through kind of the work that you've done, some of the standout things that you've been involved in different capacities. I think
Yeah.
Blackadder Rides Again is a real standout there. And then I think obviously Blackadder is going to be something that many listeners here are going to be, well, I think everyone will be familiar with Blackadder, but many of the listeners will be big fans of Blackadder. And of course, there's a huge link to Bottom and Rick in particular with Blackadder being Lord Flashheart. And then I have to confess, I don't recall Blackadder Rise Again. What happened in it? I don't know if Rick had an appearance in that particular.
Yeah.
He did. Did he have an appearance in that?
He did indeed. Yeah. No. So I was associate producer on that. Matt O'Casey was the main producer director, and Rick did give us an interview. I think there was because it was a BBC One documentary, and Rowan Atkinson was happy to do an interview for this one, and we went up to Alnwick Castle with him, and we went on all sorts of locations. Well, Alnwick Castle's probably the only location for Blackadder in the entire series, but we met up with pretty much all the main members of the cast, and Rick was up for it. It was quite an interesting one. He was entertainingly difficult, shall we say? He gave us some stipulations.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You're allowed to disclose the stipulations?
Yes, he was up for doing it, but he said he wanted to be interviewed by a glamour model in her underwear.
Fantastic.
And we sort of met his demand. We got this.
Hang on, you did meet his demand.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. We brought in a very nice model, Francoise, who was about 19 years old at the time, and she came along and she got into her underwear to do this interview. Funnily enough, there were a couple of other people who don't normally go on shoots would turn up for that one.
Yeah, I remember there was a packed crew for that.
There were a few. And Rick turned up with a couple of satchels like that, and he says, "Right, okay, where are we doing this? Oh, we're doing it over here. Okay, all right. Now you got my message about what we need." And Matt said, "Yes. Here we got your message, and we do have the glamour model in her underwear ready to interview you." And he just sort of stopped in his tracks, dropped the satchels like that, and went, "She's in her underwear." Yeah, she's in her underwear, like he said. No. I didn't ask for her to be in her underwear. She's going to be naked. She's going to be completely naked. Otherwise, it's too much like Benny Hill. We can't have any of that on this show. I don't know. I mean, we carried on with it with this sort of facade for a bit, but it didn't really work out. And if you watch the documentary in the end, you don't see a lady in her underwear interviewing Rick Mail.
No, I wouldn't have thought so.
I wonder whether he was playing with us or trying to just sort of size us up in some way or another. But he was sort of enjoyably disagreeable on the day. I mean, he could have been really annoying, but he did it with panache. So you
Yeah,
ended up sort of liking him the more he did it. It was quite a day. It was quite a day, I have to say.
I bet it was. I feel like I've heard one way or another of just through things I've seen Rick do,
Mm,
interviews and things and stories, and through his own autobiography that he did, and it's just these sorts of stories just don't surprise me at all. And it just sounds like
no.
it was him. It was how he approached stuff like this. So Adam, let's move on. Let's start to focus on the documentary Bottom Exposed.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess the first thing, how Bottom first aired 17th of September to the 1991.
Mm,
I think that's the date. That's the air date. So
yeah.
33 years ago. What
Yeah.
was the? I'm assuming the idea of this does probably come is probably closer to the birthday of Bottom, 30th birthday of Bottom than it is now.
Mm.
So what was the initial thought behind revisiting Bottom now after so many years and doing a documentary about it? What was the? How did it
This
come
came
about?
this came up I think about last January or February, where there's some new commissioners at UKTV who handle the comedy entertainment, Mark Idden and Jason Dawson. Very nice chaps. Um, they got wind that the channel controller of Gold, his favourite show, or certainly one of his favourite shows, is Bottom.
Right.
And they came to us after we did the Tony Hancock um, documentary and the Far Show documentary. They said, "Have you ever thought about doing a Bottom documentary?" And we say, "Hang on," because actually back in 2021, we did suggest doing a Bottom documentary for the 30th anniversary, and it just sort of, I don't know, I don't know what it is about anniversaries. You think you're going to make these shows for anniversaries, and they don't quite manage it. Because I think with the Far Show, we did it pretty much around the 26th anniversary of the Far Show. um, quite often you just go, "Oh, we've got to celebrate the anniversary of this," and it never happens. So this was just because, well, chiefly because the controller liked it, and we know that there's a lot of people who like it across the country. So yeah, and knowing that goals tend to do 2-hour documentaries, we put it in that format, and they also like to make an event beyond the just the documentary. So, as you may notice, they are repeating a lot of episodes of Bottom on Gold at the moment, and they're also showing at least 3 of the stage shows, as far as I can see in the schedules on my
Yeah, the first
Skybox.
three. The first
Yeah,
one, then to say the Bottom stage show, and then you've
yeah,
got the Big Number Two tour, and then you've got Hooligans Island. So the
yeah.
three, and to my mind, they are the big three. They
Mm,
are the by far the best, in my opinion, the best three
definitely.
Bottom live shows.
Mm. Yeah, but anyway, we proposed that as well, and it was fairly straightforward, really. This went. It sounded like it was going to go ahead. Um, a big part of that was making sure Aid was on board,
Yeah,
um, and you could. We couldn't tell. We couldn't tell whether he would engage with this or not. I think we were hopeful because um, with his autobiography Berserker coming out that autumn, and I suppose there's a paperback version coming out. There is some kind of a nice sort of it's sort of appropriate for the time, and it might not have been 3 years ago. And I
yeah,
think certainly with his autobiography, he's a lot more open and confessional about his career and his relationship with Rick than he ever had been before. And I think maybe the time was absolutely perfect for us to do this Bottom documentary accordingly. Um, it took a while because he's a busy man. He's always filming, and he's been
yes.
doing a lot of filming in Thailand, I believe. And he's difficult to track down and sort of persuade, and it's and the show was very important to him, and I think you probably got the impression from previous interviews and maybe even the book to a certain extent that he doesn't really like raking over the past too much.
Hmm.
So you have to sort of be reassuring and sort of say, no, this is going to be the sort of definitive word on it. Yeah, he agreed. I think there's always some bafflement as to why do you want to talk about this part of my career? I think the young ones, very much so. But yeah. But that's not to say he's not proud of the show. He's absolutely proud of the show, without any doubt in my mind. But
And
yeah.
that's a really interesting thought, Adam, about
Mm,
why Bottom? What is it about Bottom that would make you would be able to do this documentary? And I think that I think we talked about it in previous episodes and things like that. The way it captures people from a very early age, and there's things like the slapstick, the cartoon violence we've referenced
mm,
quite a few times, and that
yeah.
kind of the silliness to
Mm,
it, and then some of the language that as a youngster, as like maybe an 8, 9, 10-year-old, where a lot of people that follow
yeah.
the account got into Bottom, that you
Yeah.
just love, you're drawn into it, and
Yeah.
that hooks you in. But then it stays with you because as you get
Yes.
older, if you keep watching it, you find the live shows, and then a little bit older, the double entendres and those sorts of things, they start to mean something, and some of the other
Mhm,
cultural references then start to mean something, and then you
mhm.
get it more, and you kind of grow with it. And as you
Mm,
get older, then there's always something more to enjoy about it, right from the cartoon violence, the slapstick,
yeah.
things like that.
Yeah.
Watching people get hit over the head with a frying pan, never gets old.
Yeah.
That's what kind of draws you in. But then as you get older, you start to appreciate it more. I think it's a very unique, I think it's a very unique sitcom. Bottom.
Yes. Yeah. 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 It has all the trappings of a kid show right up front, doesn't it? And
Mm.
that does appeal to all ages as well. I mean, maybe you shouldn't show it to really young kids, but I suspect I would have been allowed to stay up late had I been 5 years old or something like that to watch it, and I'd have absolutely loved it at that age as well. I mean, you can guarantee, even though I would probably be, well, 10 years too young to watch it at the age of 5, but it didn't actually appear on screen till I was 17. Bottom, so I was in
Okay.
sixth form college when it first appeared.
Okay. So you're perfectly old enough to watch it at that
Yes,
point, I think.
yes. I would say the ideal age is probably about 12, though, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I was 10. The previous episode of this pod, I figured I did some timelines and I was 10 when I first started
Yeah.
watching it. So on the young age, but I think 12, 13. This is yeah, that's probably a good age to get into Bottom.
Yes, yeah, no, I agree. I agree. And actually, when you in this documentary, you could sort of tell that by some of the comedy fan guests that we had, like Chris McCausland, for example. He's exactly the right age to have got really into it at about the age of 12.
Yes.
So
And are you
yeah.
out? Can you elaborate on anyone who's going to be sort of from a further talking
Yeah, it's just that
about their love of Bottom from a fan perspective? Are you able to share before? Because obviously this is coming out. This podcast is coming out before the documentary.
Chris McCausland, like I said, Maisie Adam, who's quite interesting because she got into Bottom via Guest House Paradiso,
Oh,
and
really?
it was one of her favourite films when she was a youngster. She used to watch it in the back of her car. I mean, you have to watch this to find out why that happened. She does explain this, so we do a significant chunk on Guest House Paradiso as well.
Hmm.
Um, we have Lee Ridley, also known as Lost Voice Guy, who gives us a really nice perspective as well. Nina Wadia, who was just, I'm just trying to work out the timeline. She must have been a couple of years from doing the radio version of Goodness Gracious Me, so she was a bit more of a contemporary, rather. But she was just getting into the world of showbiz herself. But she absolutely loved the show. Nick Helm, you can sort of imagine Nick Helm being a big fan of the show, and rightly so. I think he was on the Young Ones documentary that Gold did as well. I think he's a huge Rick and Aid fan. And then also we sort of count as a celebrity fan Alexi Sale, which
Yeah,
is
that's fair.
because he wasn't in it, but he's got a good analysis of Rick and Aid and Bottom particularly, and why the comedy works. And also, there's all that amazing history from back in the days of the comic strip, and and the young ones and stuff like that. So it gives that nice bit of history there.
It's
Um,
interesting you mentioned, just sort of digress a tiny bit around
mm,
Alexei not being in bottom. So you look at the young ones and then bottom characters that have come across, or actors and the people that have come across. Obviously Rick and Aid,
mm,
then Dave Hedgehog, um,
yep,
ably played by, oh god, my mind's gone a blank there. Ably
Christopher
played by
Ryan.
Christopher Ryan, of course,
Yep,
and then obviously Mark Arden
hmm,
pops up in an
yep,
episode.
yep,
Helen Lederer was
yep.
also in a couple of episodes of the young ones, and obviously there's many. I think I did a week a while ago of the young ones and bottom. I might do it again actually because it was a while ago
Mm.
now, of people that have been in both the young ones and bottom. So obviously Alexi didn't come across, neither did Nigel
No,
Craner. They didn't have a role
no,
like that.
no. I think
Curious, always curious. I guess it's probably
yeah,
timelines and other work. I was always curious as to
quite.
why Nigel didn't even have just the smallest of roles at some point.
Yeah, yeah, because I think Nigel would be a good fit. I think Alexei would be a harder fit because he's such a big personality. He would probably challenge Richie and Eddie in terms of the personality.
Yeah.
Because I think with Spudgun and Hedgehog, they're much more subdued compared to the other two,
Yes.
and the dynamic really works well. But I think if you had Alexei in it, it would be you would have you'd have three very larger than life characters on there, whichever role he would play. I mean, he might, yeah. But I think a lot of these things are down to timing or
Sure.
availability or whatever, or maybe they just didn't have a role that really suited Nigel or Alexei. Who knows?
No. No.
Who
Who
knows?
knows? No. Yeah. So that's not touched upon in the documentary. We don't get any any insight into
No, no.
into
You also
that.
don't have that.
So that's great. So you get. It sounds like you've got a good kind of sort of famous fan
Yeah,
input there.
yeah.
And have we, or is there any, obviously we've got Aid on there.
Yes.
Does Aid play a prominent role in it?
He's all the way through it. I mean, the conversation is led by the interview we did with Aid. He's there at the start, he's there at the very end, and he sort of takes us through the entire history of Bottom, and then everyone else sort of chips in where appropriate. Yeah, you get a lot of Aid, a lot of Aid. And actually, at the very start of the documentary, we sort of follow the story chronologically. We talk very briefly about how they met at Manchester University. Rick and Aid met at Manchester University, and a small bit about the comic strip, a very small bit about the Dangerous Brothers on Saturday Live. Barely anything on Filthy Rich and Cat Flap. And we go straight into talking about the genesis of what then became Bottom. And actually, it's quite weird because our star fan bookings that we just talked about, they don't sort of appear until nearly part three. Quite a lot of them of a 7-part 2-hour show, because
Wow.
you want to get the basics down there. You want to hear how this all happened. So we speak to people like Paul Jackson and Ed By, and it's very much a sort of it's not normally how you do this sort of documentary, because you want some of the sort of famous faces in there before the behind the scenes people tell you what it's all about. But on this occasion, Paul and Ed were so kind of key to this and gave us everything we needed to know about how the show came about, straight after Filthy Rich and Cat Flap, and what they were developing up, and sort of all that business, and the dealings with the controller of BBC Two at the time, Alan Yentob, and it was important to get set that up, I think, and also because they know Rick and Aid so well from their time on the young ones and anything else. They were good at telling us, what's the inspiration behind Bottom, and Aid even more so, obviously. So he will talk about Beckett and Waiting for Godot, and a bit of Hancock and Laurel and Hardy, and cartoons.
Mm-hmm.
So we get down to it quite quickly with the information, and it's not this documentary. We didn't want it to be one where it's just people going, oh, I love this scene where this happens, and they just repeat what happens in the classic scene and you intersperse it with the. We might do that once or twice. I mean,
Of course, there's got to be
it
room
does
for
happen
that.
there.
There has to be room for that, of course.
But it's not people parroting what happens in it and then just going, "That's a classic." We find out from the fans themselves, why they like it, why they think it works. Uh, what's the dynamic between the lead characters, all that sort of stuff. So it's got its brain on. I'd like to think, which is quite interesting considering it's a show that very much goes against being terribly cerebral. But I think that's right. I think it's right. I think actually Bottom itself is actually, on the surface it may have anarchy, toilets, and sex, and all that sort of business.
Or lack of, in Richie and Eddie's case.
Very much a lack of. But there's some clever stuff working underneath it, and we also drill down into that very much so as well. So yeah, that was the intention.
Good. Well, that's good. I think from my point of view, one of the things I'm really keen to just is how it came about itself. How that progress from the young ones and Filthy Rich and Cat Flap, which is there's not a huge amount there, but just how and also how it was received. How when you're pitching this idea of Bottom, how do you? And I think Aid touches upon it a little bit in his autobiography about the previous working titles that it might have had. But I'm just always really intrigued at how you present this to whoever it is you need to present it to say, right, this is my idea of a sitcom.
Yeah.
Because if you've got Rick and Aid in it, you kind of know what to expect. But I'd just be intrigued to how it was received and then the kind of any pushback that it may or may not have had and how you then sort of convince people that it has to happen because it's would have been an interesting one to see that evolution of it.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is it was just this is the next Rick and Aid project.
And you want it basically
so established you would definitely want that, especially in 1990 1991, when they were doing the pilot in 1990. Yeah, definitely. I mean, but all is sort of not what you expect in that that Rick and Aid are going to do something quite brash, and certain members of the management are going to have a problem with what they've written up. So you go, yeah, we want the next Rick and Aid project. But we don't want the sort of stuff that they do because it's a bit too strong. So there's a little bit of a tussle, and I think Rick and Aid generally got away with pretty much what they wanted to do. But in the documentary we sort of explain that as well. Yes.
And have you got? I mean, obviously we've got, like I said, we've got Aid leading us through, which is great. I think that's what everyone would want to see. And is there any kind of, there's one of the great things about Bottom was, and I think I discussed this with Helen when we talked, was the characters that came in to play other roles, always really well thought out, really well cast. There was no we just need a barmaid. There was no we just need a someone to work at the Love Bureau. It wasn't just we want to fill these character roles. Every extra character from Spudgun and Dave Hedgehog to Lily Lineker to Lady Natasha, I always thought was really well thought out and always given terrific lines and terrific scenes. There was no kind of, they weren't just there to make up the numbers. These were well thought out extra characters that were going to play an important role and have memorable scenes attached to them. And I think across the board they do. And I mentioned Mark Arden as well.
Yeah,
as the fairground guy.
He's great at that.
He's absolutely fantastic. And there's loads.
Yeah,
and of course you've got Mr. Harrison, the landlord, who has a couple of iconic appearances too. So yeah, there was always good. Dickhead, the barman.
yes,
there's so many brilliant extra characters who were really well cast and had some terrific scenes. So have you managed to get any of those on board, I guess, as well?
Yeah. We've had a few. I mean, there's a couple of disappointments there in that. I'll go in the negative immediately. We couldn't get Chris Ryan or Stephen O'Donnell, who was Spudgun and Dave Hedgehog, but the other way around, because Hedgehog and Spudgun. So it's a bit of a shame, a little bit of a shame. But on the plus side, we have people like Helen Lederer, who's absolutely fantastic.
She is wonderful.
Yes, she's great, and she's got an interesting new autobiography coming out as well.
She has released on the 11th of April. So yeah,
This week.
just drop that in,
Or
Helen. So just remind you, I've dropped that in again.
yes, or by the time this is being broadcast, it's already out. Yes.
It's already out. Well, yeah.
We've got Kevin McNally, who's always a laugh. I must say, Roger Sloman, who was a total delight. Behind the scenes, I was talking about all sorts of things with him, like Hardwick House, which was a series that was abandoned after 2 episodes and had Rick and Aid in a later episode. And he was a little bit frustrated about that, but that's not about Bottom. He's really pleased to have worked on the show and always loved working with Rick and Aid and all the sort of the crowd that's associated with that. And it was, he absolutely loved it. Lisa Maxwell was brilliant.
Lily Lineker, Lisa
Lily
Maxwell.
Lineker,
Yeah.
yes.
Who was also in the bill. I didn't realize this until fairly recently. She had a
Yeah,
very prominent role in the bill, which I
yeah, yeah,
always find that absolutely hilarious because of the references that the bill gets in Bottom,
yes,
particularly around. I can even watch a whole episode of the bill without vomiting blood. And then there's another one which is a bit more foul mouthed, which I won't say it, but around
yeah,
taking the Mickey out of policemen. And then
yeah.
to then realize that Lily Lineker had a very long standing and really good role in the bill. I love the bill.
Mm,
I just found that really funny.
mm,
I love that. That's just a lovely little kind of nugget
yeah,
of
yeah.
bottomness that just
Well, what I like about Lisa as well is at the time she had done some presenting of children's shows, and then she'd moved on to doing things like the Russ Abbott show, and she had her own sketch show around the time of the recording of the first series of Bottom.
oh
But
really?
it was yeah, there was a Lisa Maxwell show that was online in the summer of '91, I think. But it was very much that sort of pre-Watershed kind of slightly straighter family audience 8:30 kind of show, but she can go into character like that. She's really good at it. So perfect for sketch shows and perfect for Russ Abbott.
Yeah.
And I think Rick requested her to be on the show on Bottom just because he'd seen her on the telly and thought she was fab. So she was thrilled to do it, and actually in the she's brilliant in our interview. I wish I could play you some of the uncut stuff. We had to actually trim one or two killer lines that she said about the show, which were absolutely fantastic. But you know, tonally, even though we're post Watershed, I think they said, "Could you please take this out?" So I mean, you are going a bit too far.
Oh, that is a shame. Will they ever see the light of day, do you think? Is there any chance
No,
of it? Oh,
no.
Adam.
But we've got all the footage lurking around somewhere. So if anybody wants to do a deluxe Blu-ray release, come and say hello because we're sitting on so much stuff. But I'll come to that later as well, I'm sure. You overshoot these things and you just go, I can't put this bit in, and it's a brilliant bit. Yeah. So Lisa's brilliant. Lisa Coleman is quite fascinating in this as well
So Lisa
because
Common, Doreen,
she's Doreen Hedgehog in is it Terror, the
Sarah, yeah,
Halloween episode, isn't it? And
yes.
they think she's Satan. And I just thought, do you want to come along and have a chat? And she said, yeah, I only did a small bit. But she was quite happy to turn up, and we
Very
just had
memorable bit, a very, very memorable bit of
very
bottom.
memorable bit, and she had me in hysterics and the whole crew in hysterics because she acknowledged the fact that she wasn't in for very much. She said a few lines and went on her way. And she was gently sarcastic about it, but in a lovely way. And in the documentary itself, she says a line acknowledging this, and that had us all in fits of laughter. But she was just great. And Lee Corns,
Of
Lee was
course,
just
dickhead.
superb. Yes, yeah. Oh, he was so lovely. He was so lovely, and gave us some really good insight as well into the entire history of Rick and Aid because he was doing comparing back in the day when it was the early days of alternative comedy, and he was a delight as well. He was really really good. And so up for this as well. And we had to cut out a particular sequence that I really wanted in there, and he did for us, which will remain under wraps at the moment because it was a lovely little moment, and it's not in it, but maybe post broadcast I could let you know what that was.
Oh, that would
Uh,
be good. That would be really
mm,
good. Some of these
mm,
things sound so intriguing. And
yeah,
I'm not surprised as well because I could imagine that when you're working with Rick and Aid on anything, and
yeah,
there's going to be pretty so much that happened behind the scenes that was hysterically brilliant and just fantastic, but isn't probably appropriate for sharing in a certain format or particular
yeah,
way. But so
yeah.
maybe some of those stories are best kept to people. But I mean, I would be really intrigued to hear some of these things that were cut because
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
sometimes it's what they said, and you just go, "That's not appropriate for whatever reason." It's you, and it's only ever because you know you might be saying something that it should remain off the record.
yeah,
But quite often it's just down to timing. We chuck so much stuff into this. We go, "It'd be brilliant if we had this bit. It's brilliant if we have this bit. Brilliant if we have this bit." And then we go, we're making a documentary that's 89 minutes and 30 seconds without adverts. And that time just gets swallowed up. And you
yeah,
just go, we have to cut this nice bit because whilst it's brilliant, it doesn't tell the story that we're trying to tell. And that's the
yeah,
that's the chief bit. Chiefly, that's what we've got to do. So Alex, who's our editor, and Tom, who was our edit producer on it, did a brilliant job. But there's only so many things you can pack into the suitcase, so you have to take it out, unfortunately, and just hope that one day that someone will do some sort of deluxe release, and you go, "We've got all this unseen material that you could use." That's my hope, anyway. That would
that'd
be
be
nice to do one
fantastic.
day, but who knows? Who knows? And then also behind the scenes people as well for this. So Ed By was brilliant, and we had a long chat with him, and he was so obliging for this as well. He really, really helped out. He had a brilliant running joke about gas men that does not feature in the documentary at all, but it made me laugh. And John Plowman, who was series producer of series 3, and Paul Jackson, who was there right at the top, getting it off the ground, giving the guys some office space, and just sort of leaving it to Ed after some time. But he absolutely loved the show, and he's so enthusiastic about it. And he's a television legend, having done so many things like the Two Ronnies and Red Dwarf and all that sort of business. And his love for Rick and Aid's work is just off the scale. Then we have people like Francesca Gilpin, who's the production manager that you often see in outtakes,
Hmm.
being on the end of jokes. She was lovely. Colin Gorry, who did the visual effects for Series 1. Sadly, Peter Ragg, I don't think is with us anymore, who did the pilot and Series 2 and 3. But Colin does tell us some nice little details. And uh, uh, Nick Roast and Laurie Taylor, who did the sound,
Mm.
they come along and just explain that it's not often you get some sound guys in to talk about behind the scenes, and I think that's a bit of a shame actually because sound is hugely important.
Oh, it is. In
But
Boston in
in
particular.
Bottom, very much so, and they were putting those sound effects in live into the studio and reacting to things that Rick and Aid were doing so well. They really had to be on the ball, so we definitely had to speak to them.
There's a couple of just
Um,
things about sounds, if you don't mind, just sort of diversing.
yeah,
It sounds I really like to sort of reflect upon. One is one of the fluffs, one of the outtakes. I think it's from series 3,
yeah.
where they're just practicing the angle and the continuity for a punch that Richie's landing on Eddie. I think it's from
Mm.
Carnival actually,
Yeah.
after the Sharon Stone monologue, where he's he's Eddie's had his Sharon Stone monologue, and then Richie's trying to get him to calm down, and they're practicing the punch, and then the sound sometimes comes in, sometimes it doesn't, and then they go for the knacker twist, and just those the way just it's always going to be fine, but the sounds really did just added a whole layer to some of that physical comedy,
Mm.
which I loved that. And then also there's just something I noticed. I did a post about this a while ago. There's whenever someone gets hurt off screen from something being thrown out of a window, for example.
Mm.
So there's one in Break where Richie is milk, milk, and then chucks the milk out of the window, and it hits the police officer, and you hear this. "Ah!" And it's just a very distinctive sound of someone being
Yeah.
hit by something. But
Yeah.
then in an episode of um, This Time with Alan Partridge, they did. He did when he went back to school. I don't know if you've
Yeah,
watched it. We went
yeah,
back to
yeah, yeah. I
school,
have, yeah.
and they did the background noise of stuff happening in the courtyard in the playground. That noise appeared out of nowhere
Really?
in an episode this time with Alan Partridge. I did a post about it. I couldn't believe that from an episode of Bottom, which would have been about 1995,
Yeah,
this same, and it was definitely the same sound because I
really.
sampled them and I played them both back to
Ah.
back. This just appeared randomly, and as soon as I heard it, the first time I've watched This Time with Alan Partridge quite a few times because I think
Mm.
it's fantastic. But the first time I immediately heard that sound, and I was like, "Wow!" I'd like to think that that sound was created for Bottom,
it,
and then it
it
just stayed in the sound department and has been used ever since. That's what I'd like to think.
it could well have been. I think they used a mixture of existing sound effects, but quite a lot they sent. I think it was Jim Whippy went out and about and sort of designed sound effects for them. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if Nick Roast in particular would have these sound effects at his command. So it's entirely possible. Yeah, very, 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 very possible. Yes, yes. We also have Linda Wood, who did the costume design, and I would like to have used Linda a lot more in the show because she goes through the actual look of Richie and Eddie. And
Mm.
again, it's one of those things that just sort of we couldn't quite cram into the small suitcase that is a 2 hour show.
Stuff like that
um,
would think people would really because their outfits, their day-to-day outfits that they wear that are
yeah,
synonymous with them. People love that, and also then you've got when just the odd time that you see them outside of their clothes, which I think
mm,
off the top of my head, Terra, for example, the banana and the devil,
yeah,
in Finger, where
yeah.
first of all Eddie when they come in from playing the cricket match and Eddie just looks absolutely
Oh God, with
ridiculous
the
in his
very
twinning jumpers and hats, and then Richie
yes,
with his dungarees, his white dungarees and the red
the stain.
stain down it. And then later on in the episode with Eddie as Eddie Edwina and Richie in his ridiculous tuxedo. There's
Yeah,
some there's some fantastic outfits.
the
I,
stain is in itself just such a brilliant gag when you think about it, because you
yeah,
know that what he's been doing, and
yeah,
you know how far he's taken it. It's just genius. It's
it is.
absolutely brilliant.
It really
Yeah,
is.
so Linda did a brilliant interview with us, and unfortunately, we'd like to have put more in, really, but we needed more time. We
Yeah.
needed more time. But she does make an appearance. But I would like to cover the costumes a bit. But there you go. Again, just talking about all the bits we had to take out. And Paul Bradley, sorry, as another guest, sorry, a cast member, sorry, he was a bit of a last minute booking for us. But he was superb talking about the early history. But we skimmed through that really quickly, so he's only on there a couple of times talking about being at Manchester University with Rick and Aid, and Rick in particular. But he told me some lovely stories about Rick far more recently, and obviously he spoke about his time being sellotaped to a ceiling as well. So
Yes, of course, in burglary. My mum, when you said
yeah.
Paul Bradley, my mind was thinking of Paul, but then I realised we're talking
Mm,
of the burglar in burglary.
mm,
Many people probably recognise him from Nigel in EastEnders,
yeah,
and later
yeah.
on in I think it was Holby or Casualty. He had quite a long
Hmm.
run in, and then
That's right.
a couple of episodes of the Young Ones as well.
Yes, yes,
As
he's
well.
the aircraft pilot alongside Andy Delator in Series One, isn't he? And he's also, is he in?
The
Oh no,
party when
he's in the party. He's the hippie. Yeah, he's the hippie
yeah,
in the party, isn't he?
there's a couple of
Yeah.
roles there, but I do his appearance in Burglary is fantastic.
Mm,
Burglaries, but yeah, really one of that we could spend hours talking about episodes, but Burglary is up there as one of my favorite episodes. And whenever I do poll, we do like the live watch party type things. I think I've
yeah.
mentioned to you before, where we just
Mhm,
basically just watch an episode through my phone. It's ridiculous, but
mm,
it works, and people are just there for the comments to chat to each other in the comments about their favorite quotes. But I
yeah.
always do a poll, so I say, nominate a poll episode you want to watch, and then the top four, providing I haven't watched them before, then go to a poll. And you know what? Burglary's never even made it into the top four, which I'm really surprised about because it's a
It
fantastic episode
it just
full of quotable lines and scenes people love. But the episode itself just doesn't seem to have the same.
it's
Yeah,
it's possibly in the shadow a little bit of gas, I think, because it follows a similar kind of line, but it's and I've heard one or two people get confused and think the gas man's been sellotaped to the ceiling because of it. But I think it's terrific. It's a tremendous episode. I mean, but then every episode has a lot of merit, a lot going for it. Actually, it's very hard to, you know, it's a difference between an 8 out of 10 episode and a 10 out of 10 episode.
Yes.
There's nothing less than 8 out of 10 in that series. So
Definitely. I would like to do. I mean, I'm not a big person. I'll be careful how I say this because this is going to come across. I might mispronounce this. I'm not a big fan of ranking episodes. I don't rank very often. But I would be keen to do kind of world. I'd be keen to do a World Cup of Bottom, just to kind of just to get an idea of where people's favorite episodes are. And I know that Gas is probably going to be heavily. People love Gas. One that surprises me the most whenever I do these polls is Bottoms Out, the one where they're on Wimbledon Common. Wimbledon Common, not well as we may find out the sets if you talk about the sets. That is really popular, and I love that episode. And I don't know if it's because there's a number of reasons why. I think because it's set outside of the flat. I think that is memorable. But also, it's one of the apart from the flasher, it's one of those brilliant episodes where it is just Richie and Eddie, and they're always my favorite episodes. Hold is my outright favorite episode of Bottom.
I was actually going to say out of that's one that always surprises me. I was going to say that separately to what you were saying, but then also Aid highlighted it as one of his absolute favourites as well. There's something nice about having recreated part of Wimbledon Common on a studio set. That must have been quite nice walking in and seeing that. I tend to go for, well, we'll talk about my favourite episodes, but I tend to go for probably ones that are more than two-handers. I like them being in amongst other people, but I think
they both have their, because again we talked recently about the side the side characters and the cameos. If they're gonna be interacting with other people, it's gonna be brilliant. But also, I just feel like the two-handers they're just supremely ambitious in any setup, in anything. So I'm thinking back to things like Psychoville. I don't know if you watch Psychoville, which is Steve Pemberton and Reece Shearsmith product after League of Gentlemen, but before Inside Number 9, which I love all of those as well. They did a very ambitious. They had Mark Gatiss come in as well in this one, but they did one which was just them in one room and they only had 2 or 3 angles. And I always thought those sorts of things, especially with Hole, where you're on the top of the Ferris wheel, there's only 2 or 3 angles with them. You haven't even got the flat to distract. It's just them in this one tiny place. It's just the way they're able to just relentlessly, they're bouncing off each other. The gags in Hole are just the one after the other. It's just a relentless. I just think it's just fantastic. It's a great. It's a big one that never really gets the when I do the polls, never really kind of gets the love, which is interesting. But
funny that. It's well, people have different tastes, but like I say, I think fans of Bottom in particular, the standard is so high, and it's so consistent as well. If you like one episode, you're going to like another episode, aren't you?
You are, yeah.
It's hard to differentiate them, really.
But actually, just sort of railing back a little bit, we talked a little bit about sets. And Wimbledon Common. Now, I noticed in some of the promo shots and the trailer for the documentary, managed to seem to have recreated part, at least, of the set. And how did that come out? Is there anything original from the set there? I mean, I can't imagine that everything's been kept for 30 years, but it looks like you've done a fantastic job of recreating that set.
Well, it was a set designer called Maxwell Fine who does all sorts of things. He does proper Netflix dramas and stuff like that, but we work with him now and again. And we had a tiny budget for this one for set design. So now we went a little bit over budget with them because actually recreating what we do is we recreate in a fashion the living room set, the living room, kitchen, conservatory set. But it's very much pared down. We only have one door, and there's 2 doors.
Well, you've got to have 2 doors.
We couldn't get a second door, but you get the sense of it, and it was extraordinary. The day we first set up in the studio. We actually filmed in 3 different studios, by the way, and which is quite surprising. The Aid interview had a much bigger studio than the others, but it was practicality. There's things happening. We film the occasional day here and there, and you can't. When you go, we want to film on this date, and then later down the month, availability is going to change. So we had to film in 3 different studios with a white infinity set, so there's nothing behind it. And you see the corners of the set and this as well. And behind it is a white background. And we just set it up each and every time. But when they were building the set initially and they were dirtying things down, and that was extraordinary, because I was going, is this going to work? Is this going to work? And then they just made it look filthy. And at about 4 o'clock, it was, oh my goodness, this really captures the essence. It's tremendous. It's so you got a sort of living room area with a telly. You got a bit of a kitchen. You got a washing line with some dirty underpants on. The dirty underpants weren't there because we did a props list. And Sashi, our researcher, at the start, she came up with a props list based on watching episodes of Bottom and the stage shows, and I think this one's a little bit like the stage show set, actually. And we made a list of the things that were on the shelves, anything. But one thing that we didn't have was some dirty down underpants from the washing line. So I said, on the day just before we shot, our first interview was with Ed By. Can we get some underpants, please, and make them look filthy? So someone went and bought some Y fronts from Marks and Sparks. Other establishments are available, and poured a load of coffee on it and just made it look grubby as anything. I actually do own one of the dirty pairs of underpants. And we don't have a side window. There's all sorts of bits that we don't have, but within the budget that we had, it looks really good. It looks great, and we shot every interview on there. And sometimes you don't want the shots to look the same when you interview people, and we've managed to get enough variety in the shot from the set that we had, which is brilliant. It looks terrific in a disgusting fashion, and really, really pleased with it. And we're not exclusively on the set as well. We do a little bit of a locations tour of Bottom, which is quite a fascinating thing to do, because it just involves just 2 places, really, doesn't it? It's a bench in Hammersmith and a derelict, a building site.
So you visit. So obviously where it was, it's obviously been developed since. But you visit there, and obviously there is now a bench, which is Rick's bench.
Yeah, it's not even the same bench.
No, it's not.
It's now an iron bench with Rick's dedication on it. No, Aid Emerson and Ed By go to, with us lot, go down to Hammersmith for a location tour to talk about the shooting of the opening titles. Which intriguingly, we've also got the rushes, the 35mm rushes. And back then, just a very small bit about the story. I think Ed wanted the shot of the 2 of them leaning out of that window. That was what he'd planned. And then Rick and Aid said, you can't just have that. We'll improvise something on this bench here. And you get, there's 10 minutes worth of improvisations on there, and they just pick the best bits. And hopefully you get to see some bits that you hadn't seen before.
Fantastic. That'll be amazing.
And it's all funny. It's amazing. The whole 10 minutes is glorious.
I bet
I've seen it. I've seen it.
To see that. And I just love this. The thing that always stands out, it would be for most people, is just in the start, the opening credits, where the bus goes by and then Rick just disappears.
Yeah.
And you've kind of sort of affirmed what I thought. I always just assumed that was just Rick just added that in, and the look of surprise on Aid's face is actual surprise of him just disappearing.
Yeah.
And so if this, what they used was fantastic. So God, what they must have taken out, they must have been so much.
Well, there was a bit of debate as to whether there was a cut when the bus went past and then Rick had disappeared, and I think Ed thought, one of them thought that there was a cut, and the other one thought there hadn't been a cut, and the truth is actually something in between. So Rick does run away when a bus goes past, but they chop just a fraction out of it, I believe. So
Oh,
you'll get
really?
to see that
Yeah.
on the
No.
show anyway.
Say no more.
One thing that we did do on the location was we did have, and this doesn't feature, unfortunately, we did have Ed and Aid looking out of a couple of the windows that are exactly the same design as the window that was just the window frame that was there on the building site, because the Hammersmith Broadway building used to this day still has those windows.
Wow.
And we had Aid and Ed looking out of a window. We had a drone shot pulling out to them, and for all manner of reasons, it didn't quite work for us. The drone didn't quite get the right angle.
Oh,
It didn't quite work, and I really wanted it to have the shot. And we pulled out, and it's an entire building now, rather than
oh,
just the building site.
that
And I
would have
was
been
really worried that we wouldn't
amazing.
be able to do it because of there was a threat of rain, and we
Hmm.
wouldn't be able to do that. But we did shoot it, but the rushes didn't look quite good enough for us to use in the end. And I think well, to be fair, we did actually annoy some. We got permission from the one of the floors in the building, but we didn't get permission from a floor above us, and they were really annoyed that we had a drone flying around
Oops.
there. I don't know what they were doing. Maybe MI6 are part of that building or something like that, and they were working on secret plans for something.
Possibly.
But you couldn't see anything. You couldn't see anything through their windows. But fair enough. We assured them that we wouldn't feature anything that's going on in their windows. But we're not featuring anything, sadly, because the shot didn't quite work.
That is a shame.
Nearly worked. And the show features hopefully all your favourite clips. It's difficult to say that though, isn't it? So I mean, we tried to get in the clips that we felt really sum up the show, and plenty of behind the scenes footage all the way through. Now, I know because Fluff came out in 1996, I believe, and I suppose all the outtakes that you've seen before of Bottom have been exclusively from that Fluff VHS. So they've done compilations of outtakes, series by series on the Bottom DVD, haven't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
About 20 minutes, because plus about an hour, isn't it? And then you got about
Yes,
20
that's right.
minutes for each episode, for each series,
Yeah.
added to each DVD. Yeah. But I
Mm.
imagine there's way, way more than you.
Well, I mean, I don't really know. I'm not as familiar with the outtakes that feature, but we had access to this because Bottom Fluff was made by a couple of guys called Steve Roberts and Paul Venises, who do a lot of Doctor Who restoration and stuff like that, and huge fans of Bottom themselves. Steve sits on. I hope he doesn't mind me saying this. Has a lot of the original scripts of Bottom, which he kindly loaned us actually, and
Wow.
there's a yes. And when we got commissioned for this, they were pretty much the first people I spoke to and said, "Have you got any behind the scenes footage or outtakes, especially stuff that didn't feature in Fluff?" And they went, "Well, we've got these compilation reels that we did in advance of Bottom Fluff, and we edited some bits out of it, so it does feature some stuff that you won't have seen before." And they very kindly transferred it from what is a broadcast quality format from the time called D3, which is now virtually obsolete, and they very kindly transferred that to a format that isn't obsolete on a machine, the BBC, that is about to conk out or something like that. uh, um, so we've got them in a usable format, but there were like 40-minute compilations from series 1, 2, and 3 each, and they feature lots of sort of behind the scenes shots and maybe the occasional outtake that you've not seen before. So it's great to put in a documentary, all that sort of stuff as well. And we do some lovely montages of Rick and Aid larking about on set and stuff like that, and it gets really quite it's really quite sweet, I think, and it really gives you the idea of how much fun they were having and how well they were best mates, especially on the show. Yeah, it's terrific, and that just gives you so much to play with as well, and it just makes it look so classy as well. So I can't thank Steve and Paul enough, and also Aid and Rick's family for allowing us to show it.
That is amazing.
Because it just is, like I say, you'll have seen some of the stuff before, but hopefully there'll be some bits here and there that you won't have seen before, and it
This
just
is it.
really it makes for a richer kind of documentary, if you
Because
pardon the expression.
so much time passes that you often think that you've seen everything.
Mm,
You've seen all the S series, you've seen all the live shows, you've seen the Guest House Paradiso, and you've seen
yeah,
the fluffs. And then every now and again, something just crops up. There's you see like like a behind the scenes shot that you've not seen before. The odd thing just filters out here and there that just crops up online when I'm
yeah,
researching. But I think I must have seen everything by now.
yeah,
But then when a documentary like this comes along, and then you start talking to people that you can say who owned original things and have had these things stored away, all of a sudden there's all these things that the fans aren't going to have seen before.
yeah.
And to think that after 35 years nearly, there's going to be some new footage that we're not going to have seen before, that is tremendously exciting.
Yes, yeah, I hope so. I hope so. Yeah, yeah, and also it's very important to make sure that Rick is part of this, even though he's
Mm.
not available, sadly, to
No,
do an interview for us. And I don't know if he would have anyway.
no,
Actually,
well,
yeah. We've got some nice university footage of Rick and Aid with their contemporaries and a few stills and stuff like that. And then also, I think it's come from Comedy Connections. There's some film rushes of VT rushes of Rick being interviewed about the New Statesman for Comedy Connections, and there's some bits at the top that sort of relate to stuff that we talk about as well. So, and I don't know if they featured in the Comedy Connections or not, but yeah, they might be new bits. So there may be a little hint of new Rick material here and
oh,
there as well. So,
fantastic.
yeah, yeah. And then beyond that, we talk about all aspects of it. So it's not just the TV series. We talk about the stage shows. We have clips from all five of those in there as well. And I'm really pleased with the way Alex and Tom have edited in that into the story. There's a bit where we go into the story of Rick and Aid post quad bike accident, and the theatre, the stage show stuff really meshes in really, really nicely there.
Mm.
Um, and we also cover Guess House Paradiso, which isn't an official bottom movie. Let's be fair. I mean, they're playing different characters, and
They
actually, I
are
think
playing
I
different
think
characters.
Rick's performance is slightly different anyway. He's a bit posher, isn't he?
He is, yeah, yeah.
But to all intents and purposes, it is a bottom movie, isn't it? I
It
mean, they did
is.
it with the with the intention of not doing going on another tour, I think, and they thought they'd make a film instead. Um, and it wasn't necessarily the most successful thing. The one thing that doesn't make it into the cut is actually Age saying that he'd just seen Delicatessen because he directed Guest House Paradiso. He just made Delicatessen, and I think the way they graded the picture is just he thought it was too dark, and he recommends anybody to who's going to watch Guest House Paradiso turn the brightness up, and
It is very dark, actually.
it becomes a funnier movie. So it's not a bad movie. I think it's all right actually. There's
I
some
quite
grotesque
like
stuff,
it.
and it's all right there. And yeah, Maisie Adam that's her first Rick and Aid experience, and that's her go-to place is Guest House Paradiso.
And the
So we
community, the
cover that.
bottom community like it. There is big,
Yeah,
big love for it in the bottom community, I think. And I
it
think
is not. It is not worth. It didn't deserve the one-star reviews that it occasionally got when it came out at the time.
yeah.
I think there's plenty to enjoy in it.
I think
Uh,
if you're going to go and watch Guest House, if you're going to go and watch Guest House Paradiso at the time, you knew what you were going to see. You wouldn't
mhm.
probably say paying too much attention. It was made for an audience, wasn't it? That were probably going to watch it regardless of the reviews.
Yeah,
With that in mind, so yeah,
yeah.
I do like it. And like I say, it's not officially bottom, but it's all intents and purposes it is, and it's as a bottom fan, you get. I think you get what you want from it.
Yes, yeah, yeah. I agree. Yeah, and this all ties in with the overarching story of the relationship between Rick and Aid. And this by we're a 7-part documentary with the ad breaks, because I sort of measure it in where we put the ad breaks in. This is what you do. And part 6, that's where we go down the sort of the more troubled side of their relationship. post quad bike accident,
Mm.
and Rick sadly not being quite the same as he was, but still very talented, still very funny. I guess his memory was not his what it was. I guess his there was a sort of personality change to some extent, not a great personality change, but he was harder to work with for all manner of reasons. And Aid, like in his autobiography and on the Desert Island Disc, which was broadcast a few days after we interviewed him, actually. So
Oh,
I,
really?
I didn't listen to it because I was thinking, oh, he's going to say the same stuff, and I think he probably does. But
Mm.
I didn't want to go, oh, shucks,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
got there first. But you're going to tell the same story. But Aid is absolutely brilliant in being quite open, honest, and moving about what is quite a sad bit of his life.
absolutely.
It
Yes.
goes from, I think Bottom really covers the highs and lows of their relationship, because I think, he says in our show that, some of his favorite moments of his entire life is just sitting in an office in Richmond, I think, maybe, and next to a pub, and just thinking about ideas for the series. They're his fondest memories of Rick as well, and with Rick not being quite what he was, and still wanting to keep the series going in some form or another, and Rick feeling that it had its time. It doesn't quite work out in the way you want it to, sadly.
No.
But yeah, and he also elaborates a little bit on the the spin-off series, the Hooligans Island series that was proposed but
Hmm.
never happened.
Yes.
And I really wanted to sort of solve the mystery of that. He doesn't think any of the scripts were good enough for that, and I did ask, "Can we have a look at them?" He said no,
No, no chance.
and I think that's fair enough. It's off limits if he doesn't think the quality's there. We do talk a little bit about plot lines and stuff like that, and what he tells us about the plot lines for some episodes. They sound funny, the way they're described as a one-line idea. You go, I'd love to see half an hour of that. But it's a whole different story saying what happens in this episode, and how the script came out, and you know. But it did get awfully close to being made. I know there were production designers on it and
Yeah.
stuff
I
like that, and they were set to go, but Aid's heart wasn't in it, for certain. And
I do
we
remember
talked
there
a bit
being
about that.
just a press release about at the time a few
Mm,
things that I liked comedy wise had just been recommissioned, or there was some news about the three, and a series 4 of Bottom in extent
yes,
was announced kind of formally that
yeah.
this has been green lighted and it's going to happen. And I remember thinking at the time, yeah, that's unexpected, and I would
Mm,
never in a million years have thought that. I thought we'd get more Bottom aside from maybe another live or something live
mm,
showy,
mm,
especially not a series. And then obviously then it did never appear, and then it
yeah.
was only a couple of years later that Rick died. I feel like it was about 2012-ish that this
I
news
think it
was
might have
released
been.
around, even though he died in 2014.
It might have been even closer than that. It might have been 2013. I'm
Oh,
not,
really?
I'm not sure. I think you might be right, actually. It's certainly around that time, and I was looking forward to it.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
I
mate. I
was
was
I
looking.
was wondering how you string a 6 episode series out of the premise.
I mean, at the time, any Bottom was good Bottom if it was new.
Oh
Anything,
yes,
yeah,
yeah,
what you want to see, and you want to see what
absolutely,
how they approach it in that time. But yeah, we will
yeah,
we will never, like say, AIDS doesn't think that the scripts are worth wants to share, so we will never know. And I think
no,
there's an element of mystery. That's fine. I think that's actually quite
mm, mm,
to leave it there, and we
yeah.
it sounds like we get a bit of closure in this documentary on exactly what happened there. So that's something else to
Yes, I think
look
so, and
forward
I
to.
think it's interesting that the series and the stage show and the film is a framework for an excellent story about Rick and Aid's relationship. Well, tragic story about Rick and Aid's relationship in many ways, but it does encompass all of that. And it's interesting that Gold in their trailers are going down that angle about best mates making a show they loved, and it really is. It really is that I think. I mean, they had their ups and downs, but ultimately, they were great mates, and they loved doing the show at its peak. They absolutely. Um, uh, yeah, yeah. Because I remember when they announced Bottom, and they did a press release, and they were saying it's the new Young Ones was the thing that they were saying it wasn't. It wasn't quite like that, really,
Not
was it?
quite, no.
But
No. You can see probably why they went in that direction because of the people involved and the setup. Blokes living together.
mm.
Obviously, it's slightly completely different situation, but it was Rick and Aid. It was blokes living together in a grubby
It's,
place, so you can kind of see where this new young ones came from.
it's a weird thing for you. I said this UK TV when we do a, a new show, they have a big meeting with all the bosses and the heads of different departments, and the social media department there, and the marketing department there, and the commissioners are there, and the boss of the channel's there, and they're just you get together and you say what this program is, what you're going to do, how they're going to publicize it, when they're going to show it, all that sort of business. You have a big old meeting. And these days it's done on Zoom because no one's in offices anymore.
Just like
And
this very podcast is being done on Zoom.
very much so. And I made this documentary on this laptop in this what is my parents' conservatory. A lot of the Bottom documentary was made here.
Oh wow, that's some
Sometimes
great
in my
insight.
flat. But one of the things I probably started on the wrong foot by saying, and of course I'm exactly the right person to make a documentary about Bottom because between 2010 and 2015 I was living with a housemate, both single, in Hammersmith. In quite a dingy looking place. And someone then asked her, so did your life sort of mimic their life? And I said, to some extent, yes.
Yeah,
And they just said, please don't say anymore.
yeah,
Just
leave
don't
it at
say
that.
anymore. Don't incriminate yourself. Um,
You weren't cosplaying as Richie and Eddie on a weekly basis.
no, no, but I worked out which one of us was Richie and which one of us was Eddie out of the two of us.
You're welcome to disclose which one you were.
I reckon I was Richie.
Fair,
I reckon I was.
fine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because yeah, yeah, yeah. My housemate has my former housemate. He's now married, by the way. My former housemate had a close cropped or shaven head, so I mean, it's automatically you have to go Eddie. But I think in terms of personality, I suppose we were a bit more like, yeah, yeah. It was. I was the Richie of the relationship.
I always find it interesting when you talk about things like Bottom, and also I'm a big fan of Peep Show too.
Yeah.
People always like to, or blokes in particular.
Mm,
I don't want to exclude women or anyone for that matter
mm,
from this sort of thing. But blokes always want to say like, am I Mark or am I Jeremy?
mm,
And I always
mm.
feel like there is always from a bloke's point of view, now, am I Richie or am I more Eddie? And
Yeah. Because in
I
that, out of those two, I would be more of a Mark than a Jeremy, I think.
I think you see a Mark in a lot. I think Mark is closer, although he's as
Yeah,
big at arse as Jeremy, it can be.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You see a lot more of your common man in Mark, I think, generally, just a day to day.
Yeah,
And
I think so.
I think I'm more Richie than Eddie, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
If I look back at my life and mainly just around the interaction with the awkward interaction with women and
Mm.
just kind of the relentlessly unsuccessful attempts in all areas, I just feel like Richie is the one that you see more of people. I don't know. Could be
Oh, this is
wrong.
getting very confessional now.
That might. I mean, to be fair, on the last episode, I did confess that Helen Lederer playing the nurse in Apocalypse was my first crush. So
Ah,
it is called
really?
My Bottom after all. You're learning things about me.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, Adam,
yeah.
I think this is probably quite a nice way to kind of round up discussion about the documentary.
Yeah.
So I think you've given us a tremendously exciting kind of what to expect
Mm.
on Thursday, the 18th of April at
Yes,
9 p.m.
yes.
Gold,
Hmm.
UK TV Play, and Now TV.
Hmm.
Those are the places you can see it. So yeah, thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing
That's
that.
absolutely fine. Yes, yes. I hope
Um,
I've made it sound interesting. I promise you, it is one of the favorite things I've done, and I'm always a bit nervous about how people are going to take it and stuff like that. But I cannot wait for people to see this one. I really cannot wait because I think we do a really, really good job, and we do the show justice. And I think everyone's on top form. There's stuff in there that you won't have seen before. The stuff that you have seen before and want to see again. There's other little treats there that I think I've not elaborated on that you're going to love. The soundtrack's spot on, I think, in terms of the music that we use. The other behind the scenes stuff, I think, is that I haven't mentioned will go down an absolute treat, and it's cut together so nicely and cut together with a lot of love for the show as well. I mean, every one of us on this, we had some people who didn't really know what Bottom was, but then they watched it and they thought this is terrific. But then when we were in the editing stage, we were working with Alex, who's a huge fan, Tom, who's a huge fan, and just some of the stuff that we've put together there is really nicely. Yes, it's classy. It's classy. I'm really, really happy with it.
Yeah.
One other thing I'd say about the documentary, even though we go down a sad route, we make sure that we have plenty of stuff just to make you happy as well. We end on a high note and stuff like that. So if you're worried about it getting too sad, we do put lots of laughs in at the end.
And I think that's always going to be, I think we sort of touched on it a little bit. And I think when you're making the documentary about Bottom, that's always going to be tinged with that sadness that we can't have Rick, or you can't have Rick on to do it alongside Aid. Like you said, we would never know if he would have said yes or not. But it is always going to be tinged with that sadness because we do have to reflect on the fact that Rick isn't with us anymore, sadly.
There's my favourite bit in the whole documentary is Aid. It gets very sad with Aid, but there's a question I ask, and then he gives an answer that just makes us chuckle straight away, and we just end the sad bit on that, and it's
fantastic.
But I won't say any more.
Say no more, but no, that sounds like exactly what we want. They say it's going to be some sadness there, but above all, there's going to be plenty of laughs, which is what we want to have.
Yes,
fantastic. Adam, before you go, I've just got 3 questions for you. 3 questions, and they are Bottom related. And you might not be able to answer them fully because I appreciate these are quite different. We've touched upon this a little bit already. But I would love to know 3 things. The first thing I would like to know is, if you were ranking, what would be your number 1 Bottom episode, if that's possible? You can cheat and give me a top 3, or just give me a list of your favourites.
Okay.
But I'd love to know what
I think it's going to be down to 2 episodes. I love every episode. I think for me, my favourite series is series 2. I don't know why. It just comes together so nicely. Series 1, they feel like they're finding their feet and just testing lots of stuff out, and it's brilliant on the whole. Series 2, they know what works, and they take it that bit further, and it's quite a little bit more sophisticated. And then series 3, I think, is brilliant in a different way because they've just done the stage shows, and they realise what makes the audience really laugh at the stage shows, and it's a bit more raucous. And brilliant because of it. And it does not hold back. I mean, Terror is an episode that really does not hold back.
No, not at all.
In terms of, and it works brilliantly. But for me, I think series 2 is the best because I just think it's possibly. This sounds wrong, but is it? I dare I say it? It's the most sophisticated of the 3 series.
I agree. I think it is most sophisticated. You're right.
Yeah, and
it's got culture in for a start. If it's got some
exactly.
culture.
Exactly, and that is one of my favourite episodes. I think that is superb. As a 2-hander, it's my favourite.
Yeah.
I wonder why. I'd like to give it a sort of a cerebral explanation, but there's just something fun about the chess pieces. The chess pieces on the board when you've got a cactus with a paper crown on its head. That makes me laugh. And just the stuff between the 2 guys and the resolution with the fact that it's the telly was all right all along, and there's a bit of fourth wall breaking. That's some real proper fourth wall breaking there, isn't there?
And you know what? It's one of the few times we get Aid interacts with the camera quite a bit, doesn't he? He gives the old the look to the camera and interacts a little bit. It's only 8:30 in the morning, and he gives the odd look to the camera. I think Culture is the only time we ever see Richie do that. Apart from at the end of Hole, where they both, where Aid's doing it. No, Richie doesn't look at the camera, doesn't break the fourth wall. That's the only time we ever see Richie not because Abe does it a lot. You don't see a lot with
Yeah.
Richie at all. So that's one of the few times.
No, that's a very good point. It actually makes the outtakes feel like you're still watching Bottom though, because the fact that they address the camera
Yeah.
there so often, it works really really well as a sort of release. I seem to remember them, the guys, by the way. Sorry, I'm digressing now. Paul and Steve, when BBC they took it to what was then BBC Worldwide, they didn't think that was going to be a hit. That outtakes video,
Oh, really?
and then it turned out to be a massive, massive hit. And the brilliant thing about that was everyone was paid royalties. And Lisa Maxwell said that both Lisa Maxwell and Lee Korn said we got a check from that was beyond our imaginations. Lisa didn't know where it had come from, and she was financially not in a good place, and she got this check for what was quite a good sum of money, and
I
it was
bet, because she features heavily in them, doesn't she? The
yeah,
bluffs.
yeah.
I have to
Yeah,
look up. I think
and it saved her bacon. It really did. I think that might not have made it into the documentary, but she told us that. So, but anyway, sorry. Culture is one of my favourites. The other one, and I think this may have the edge on it, is Digger. I really like Digger, and the reason why I really like Digger is the way the audience cannot believe what's going on. They are in fits of laughter more than any other episode that's on there. And it's the last one that's recorded in the second series, isn't it? It's the first one they put out, and
yeah.
that they thought. You can tell that they think this is a particularly good one to kick off with. The audience are on the floor throughout. It just works. It works brilliantly well. Rick's nervousness when he's doing the dating tape, and then actually going to do it with I can't remember her full name.
Lady Natasha. Let's not try. Let's not
We'll
try.
just go Lady Natasha.
Yeah.
But that is such brilliant Rick acting there.
It is.
I love it when he gets nervous. It's some of the funniest stuff that he does, and just everything just works brilliantly. The mashed potato bit, just the interplay between all of them, and it just takes it further. The story that it's an actual date and she's prepared to marry him is brilliant, and Lisa at the top's brilliant. Yeah, Digger really is class in a glass.
Glass in the glass. That is a good way to describe it. Thank
Glass in
you.
a glass coming from an inside pocket of a jacket.
Yes. Glass in a glass in a
Mhm.
glass of emergency bitter.
Yes, that's the one.
On that note, actually, do
Yeah.
you have again, it might be a difficult one to narrow down to one, but is there a quote from any Bottom episode or live, or even Guest House Paradiso that it sticks
Mm.
out that you say that either you just love or that finds its way into your day-to-day makeup? Is there just a standout quote? I know I put a
I'm
few, but
I'm
I think
absolutely terrible at quotes. I would be the sort of person who thinks it's "Don't tell him his name, Pike. Don't tell him your name, Pike," or something like that, and just blow it. See, I blew even saying that by saying that wrong.
Blue getting the
Um,
wrong quote wrong.
get the wrong quote wrong. So I'm not someone who quotes things very often, and I do a bit of quoting from the young ones and a bit of quoting from Blackadder, and that's largely it. But there are a couple of bits from Bottom, and strangely enough, they're not really one-liner bits as such, but or brilliant quotes. But I will never forget the gas episode where Rick again nervously tries to tell that once upon a time story to the gas man, and goes, "Once upon a time there were some trousers called Dave," and I think that is actually a quite an important bit in comedy actually, because Dave wasn't a comedy name before then. I swear Dave was never a comedy name before then, and then he the name Dave then became a go-to staple for a comedy punchline, or the name of your dog or the name of your channel. I
Yeah,
think
yeah, exactly.
the fact there's a channel called Dave, I think, is partially inspired by that moment in Bottom, and I'm prepared for someone to challenge me on that, but I'm going to stick my neck out, and I think that so I think it's actually quite an important line
Dave
for
has
that
never
reason.
been the same since. I agree
Yeah.
with you. I agree with you.
And another one that I end up quoting, I don't know why. It's series 3. It's Terror. It's when Richie goes Welsh, does his Welsh voice to Eddie. He just says, "You've gone all Welsh. Have you got any more exploding carrots?" It's just he does the full-on sort of nostrils acting when he says that line as well, and he's so blunt with a terrible Welsh accent,
Yes,
but
you can really
it
see his
just
face
makes
as
me
he's
laugh.
doing it. His mouth
Yeah,
is wide, and you can see it. Yeah,
yeah,
it's exceptional. Like I say, it's exceptionally
yeah.
crap Welsh accent, but the way he goes for it is amazing.
Yeah, because it's carrots as well, not
Carrots.
carrots. Carrots. And he does it so sarcastically. I love it. I love it. I don't think many people will pick up on that one. I don't think there'll be many other people saying that line but it just makes me laugh. I don't know what it is. It just triggers lots of laughter from me. So
I might use this as a bit of a trailer for the podcast, and I might ask people to put their favorite quote in the comments, and let's see what people come up with. I reckon there'll be a few exploding carrots in there. I reckon.
do you
There'll be
think?
a few. Yeah, I reckon there'll be
Oh, I thought it was just me.
a few. We'll see. And finally, my final question for
Yes.
today would be, do you have a favorite character in Bottom that's not Richie and Eddie? So anyone but Richie. Is there anyone on or off screen? It could be anyone that's a regular that comes in as a one-off or a bit of a recurring one, like your dickheads or your Spudgun and Dave
Yeah.
Hedgehogs, or even someone who's mentioned but never seen. I always like the never seen characters are some of my favorites.
Yeah, I'm just going to have to go quite ordinary on this one. I'd love to come up with a devastatingly clever answer, but I think Dave Hedgehog and Spudgun, but Hedgehog really works for me, and I think it's so nice to see Chris Ryan doing that sort of role after doing Mike from the Young Ones, and it's a bit of a shame with Mike from the Young Ones because he is a good character, but he's not. He's sort of very feels like he's written with Ben Elton's voice in mind a little bit, and you know, Chris was a last minute booking because Peter Richardson couldn't do Mike
Oh, really?
for whatever reason. Yes, I think so. And always felt like everyone seems to think he's the weaker link out of the cast of the Young Ones. And I think he's tremendous in it. I think he's really, really good. But here he feels more at home. I think he likes playing that sort of permanently bewildered, sort of vague kind of character, and he does it so well. He's superb. When he can't remember the name of the person who gave him that Christmas present, and it was his wife. Yeah, it's really funny, and the timing is beautiful, and I think I was just thinking just now before we got chatting. What would a spin-off series with Spudgun and Hedgehog be like?
I was thinking that too when we were chatting. Actually, what? Yeah, wonder where that would have gone. A spin-off with.
Could you make it work? I know Aid absolutely adored the character, and I'm sure Rick did as well. It would be quite nice to ask him if you ever had to do a Spudgun and Hedgehog spin-off, and you still couldn't you? Because they're both, still around. And they're both great.
And imagine how the filth that Rich and Eddie lived in. I could just imagine the absolute squalor that they lived in.
And I bet lots of people would watch it because
Oh, definitely.
they would be quite interested in that. And what characters would they meet? What would they do? In fact, I think Aid says this himself actually in the documentary. Maybe we should get in touch with him and say, "Have you ever thought about it?" He probably wouldn't, would he? But
You've got to pitch it. If you don't pitch it, then
we should ask him.
Got to ask the question.
Ask him, yeah. But I'd be very curious. Maybe the comedy is not knowing what they get up to outside of it. Maybe that's why it wouldn't work.
Maybe I think that's part of the appeal because these two blokes, they turn up a couple of times per series, so you only see them 5 or 6 times.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you don't know where they come from, you don't know where they go again. And
yeah.
I know I think it's in Doe when they turn up at the door and he says, "Oh, what brings you around here?" And then Dave says, "The bus." And then he says, "No, why are you here?" And he's always Teddy's broke. And you just kind of get like a little bit of kind of, they got the bus, their Teddy's broke.
Yeah.
Dave Hedgehog's got a wife called Susan.
Yeah, yeah. And a daughter called Doreen,
What's called Doreen?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you get a little bit into Dave's. You get a little bit into Dave's And also you get
Mm.
Spudgun doing his crap joke about his wife is in Barbados, isn't it?
Yeah.
My wife's
Yeah,
in
that's
the
right. Yeah.
Bahamas. I don't know if he's
Yeah.
even got a wife. So there's just there's
No.
this real element of mystery about it, which I think actually is probably better left unknown. Leave it to your imagination.
Maybe you could do a comic relief sketch
Oh,
with them in.
that would be good. No, that is
That
good.
would be lovely. Yeah. But you'd have to pair them with, I don't know, maybe a celebrity or something like that. That might work. That would be. I would
You'd have
love
to
to see
put them
that.
in a situation with this something that's already existing. You know, in
Mm.
like Comic Relief, they do kind of they put someone on the one show, don't they?
Mm.
I'm not saying you should
Yeah.
put them on the one show, that would be a terrible idea. But do you know what I mean? Like you'd have to put them somewhere that, yeah, an existing kind of setup that
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
put them into. So the bottom meets something else with Hedgehog and Spudgun. Yeah, that could be really good.
I'd like to see it, even if it was terrible. I would still like to see it because there would be something in it that was actually not that bad. Because you can't, the Steve and Chris are so good. There will be. I'd just like to see their faces again. They're just
Definitely.
just
Just
tremendous.
one more thing I just want to, just in
Mm.
my head of Chris doing Dave Hedgehog is when they're drinking the gravy, to drink the gravy, and then they look at each other, and then he goes, "Drink it." He's a psycho. I just absolutely love the way he delivers that. While Richie's standing there with his wonky finger and his ridiculous braces and trousers, just you look at
Yeah.
him when he says it, and then you look at Richie and you're like, "Yeah, he is a psycho."
Definitely, definitely. Oh, it's a beautiful line, isn't it? So everything was just so thought out, so well thought out. All the incidental lines are fantastic. Nothing is a waste of time in that show.
No, never, never. There's
Nothing.
not a wasted line, is
No.
there? Adam, I think this is a good place to kind of just really wrap things up. So,
Mhm.
thank you once again for your time, and speaking to me about
Yeah.
everything that we've spoken about, and obviously in particular the documentary which is coming up on Thursday the 18th of April, 9 p.m.
Hmm.
UK on Gold now, and all the other ways that we've mentioned. And when I share this, I'll
Yes.
put the options in the various bios and links and things
Hmm.
like that. But thank you so much for your time. We're really looking forward to it, and hopefully,
Been a pleasure.
as the podcast goes on, we'll speak to you again at some point.
Oh, I'm more than happy to. I can chat forever. So about anything. So yeah. Please do. Please do.
Great stuff.
As
Thanks
long
for
as I don't have to remember specific scenes from specific episodes, that's where I get a bit
absolutely. Well,
lost.
absolutely not. We'll figure that out. If we do, I'll give you some pre-warning.
Yeah, no, it's so lovely to be able to talk about something that I really enjoyed doing, and I hope people like it.
I think they
Um,
will. I'm hoping they will. I think I'm looking
yeah.
forward to seeing it myself. And yeah,
Mhm.
just looking forward to it. And thank you.
Thank you. It's been lovely. It's been lovely. Thanks very much, Ross. You've been a wonderful host.
Thanks. Cheers, Adam. Bye.
Just bye.